Remember Dexter's Laboratory? The show that taught every kid in the 90s how to say cheese omelette in French?
Omelette de fromage.
Dexter's Laboratory was a show about a 10-year-old boy named Dexter who managed to build a secret laboratory inside his bedroom where he exercised his passion for science. He built a giant computer that can talk to him, built robots, and a whole bunch of other crazy things. And I'm 24 and all I have is a desk. In the show, he gets bombarded by his idiotic older sister Dee Dee, who frequently wrecks Dexter's work, and he also has parents who don't even know the lab exists to help emphasize the secrecy of the lab itself. Despite not running long, it was a fairly good show with an 8 out of 10 on IMDb, higher than Suicide Squad. Interesting characters and clever plot lines, and to top it all off, it was my favourite show when I was a kid. Now, with every mildly successful cartoon show, there has to be a licensed game to go with it, and Dexter is no exception. Presenting Dexter's Laboratory, Disaster Strikes for the Game Boy Advance. Since Dexter's Laboratory was my favourite show as a kid, a game based on the show would immediately draw me towards it. The game has a simple premise. Dee Dee, being herself, walked into a cloning machine, made 124 little Dee Dees that start running around everywhere in the lab, and Dexter must find each one and return them back to the cloning machine where he can undo what Dee Dee did. It's all displayed in a short and sweet cutscene that plays right before the title screen. It can be skipped, and you can still understand what's going on if you haven't seen the show. That's all we get for story, so let's begin the game by naming our file. Heh poop. So the game starts out in the hub and contains 6 areas of the lab with 2 others elsewhere. Within each area are 4 sub-areas with challenges and 4 DDs for you to collect. Only one of these areas is accessible from the start, and the others can be opened up by collecting DDs in a similar fashion to the unlock structure in Super Mario 64. Now, given my history of loving the show and seeing every episode multiple times, I did fear that every area would look too alike to each other, where all the tiles and walls were the same bland blue colour. Fortunately, I was wrong. Every single area has its own unique appearance, except maybe the first and third areas. They looked a little too similar. But the others are all different, especially the later areas. This helps the game feel less repetitive, and it helps that every area is science related. Area 1 is the aviation hangar and makes good use of aircraft and things related to aircraft for both puzzle solving and hazards. Fans, for example, are spinning, creating gusts as part of the air theme, and these gusts can push Dexter along the path. They get taught in this area, and the challenge kicks in by having the fans act as an obstacle that can blow Dexter into some active jet engines which can damage him. Another one is the rocket. You press a switch which triggers the rocket to be launched, and you have to steer the rocket past obstacles to blow up some bars which has another switch behind them. So the game's off to a great start. Let's see what else it has to offer. Area 2 is the greenhouse, so it's full of a lot of plant life and you fight plant enemies. Area 3 is the robotics lab, where you find robots standing around the place. It also has treadmills and a shaft tunnel which you can travel through. Area 4 is the chemistry lab, including a fancy green background. Obviously chemicals. That place is flooding with it. Area 5 is the Lab of the Lost, which is based off of an actual episode of the show where Dexter unintentionally finds himself lost, where he doesn't know where he is in the lab he built himself. And if you think that doesn't make sense, then you're just as confused as I am. Lab of the Lost itself is a visual step up from the 4 previous areas. The others all look like just a palette swap from the hub, but this place actually looks old and run down, with scraps all over the place and a broken teleporter. Area 6 is the nuclear power station. Is it? I'd like to remind everyone that this is located in the middle of an ordinary residential street where every adult is unaware of what's right nearby. Potentially fatal deaths aside, the power plant is just as visually impressive as Lab of the Lost is, if not then more so. It also contains a puzzle which requires powering up an electric wire. If you've collected every DD from the aviation hangar to the power plant, then you're treated to the final area of the game, Spaceport. Have I said area too much? The Spaceport has a few spots where it messes with the gravity, which is to be expected in a space level. Dexter appears rather floaty in these seemingly exterior areas, even though he seems to be breathing, and the gravity more reflects the moon than outer space. But the gravity alterations do well reflect the space theme. There's one more bonus area for collecting all 112 DDs up to this point, which is Dexter's house. It has no enemies and acts as an extra fun level, same thing for the school sub-area at the end, although getting there is an absolute hassle. In the third sub-area, Dexter runs down the street in a robot suit. I appreciate something a little different, but during this you have to steer him and you can't see where you're going. Now, I went over those areas rather quickly because I only looked at aspects pertaining to the theme of each individual area. I praise the aviation hangar for including stuff like the fans and rockets because they're related to air travel. However, these are sadly only seen once in the entire game, but that is nothing compared to how neglected every other area is. The greenhouses plant enemies, but they're either repulsively unfair, incredibly easy to avoid, or not any different to the robots, as in you can kill them with punches, and while I think that enemies can be more or less the same with a different look based on where you are, there are no actual puzzles in the greenhouse that relate to vegetation. The closest thing is the green goo, but it doesn't make as much sense here than it does in the chemistry lab. Apart from that, everything is pressing a button, walking on certain spots in a particular order, delivering a specific keycard to a certain lock, platforming, and opening up gates. And while none of these things are bad to have, none of them relate to being in a greenhouse, like a puzzle revolving around the aroma of a plant, for example. The robotics lab has the shaft, which is very little to do with robots, and also has the treadmills with the crushers, which is related to robotics, but it's the only thing in the whole area that is related to robotics. After that, it's the switch puzzles. And this theme continues mostly throughout the rest of the game. The chemistry lab has little to do with chemistry, the Lab of the Lost doesn't build on being a rundown old version of the lab, the nuclear power station has a giant electric wire that you power up, and I thought that was cool. This kind of puzzle wouldn't fit well into any other area, but it doesn't seem that big a deal within the power station, and as a result, every area in the game except for the aviation hangar and Dex's house, all to a degree, feel like a missed opportunity. The reason it's to a degree is because any cool parts in one area are only seen in one sub-area. The other three are just a bunch of switch pressing and countless backtracking. That's right, backtracking. There is so much backtracking in this game. The reason there's backtracking is because in order to collect a DD, you have to pick her up with the claw tool and take her to the suction tube in the current sub-area you're in. The issue is that you can only carry one at a time, and so kicks in the aforementioned backtracking. It's at its worst in the chemistry lab. Look at this map and see how much unnecessary travel is done to get every DD to the tube. Puzzles also have backtracking in some of the earlier areas, but not nearly as obnoxious as the DDs. This form of travel pads out each area to a length that justifies its existence, but none of what you do is satisfying. I think to make the experience more satisfying would have been to cut the sub-areas concept and make one big area within the limits of the Game Boy Advance and have that one area circle around the puzzle related to the area itself, like the aroma puzzle idea for the greenhouse, building a robot in the robotics lab, making a chemical formula in the chemistry lab, doing something useful with scrap metal in the Lab of the Lost, the list goes on. With those changes combined with the ability to carry more than one DD at a time, the experience of this game would have been more enjoyable. Much more enjoyable, because the game handles a lot of other things right. The item structure is good because it's super simple, the tutorial is good because it teaches the basics well, and playing it is surprisingly fun. When writing this review, I was bouncing between whether I thought this game was good or bad, because I thought of stuff like the tutorial and thought it was good, but then I thought of stuff like the area design and thought it was bad because of dull puzzles. This game feels like a massive missed opportunity. Fresh gaming experiences come from relevant level design, and Donkey Kong Country Returns for the Wii is a great example of that. Almost every level in the game uses mechanics related to the world it's in. The waves in the beach, the rocket in the factory, the lava in the volcano. Disaster Strikes decorates the areas with the theme, but in a lot of cases fails to incorporate them into the gameplay. Pick up the game if you're curious about how it works, but otherwise, don't bother. I'm Hatwearing Gamer, and this has been Dexter's Laboratory Disaster Strikes. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed my take on Dexter's Laboratory Disaster Strikes for the Game Boy Advance. I know it's been a bit of a while since I put out a video last time, but that's okay. It's here. It's finally here, and it's ready for your viewing pleasure. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and keep an eye out for my next video, which will be my next series talk on the Mario and Luigi RPG series, where I'll just be reviewing each game individually. In its own separate videos. So yeah, look out for Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which will be coming soon, whenever it comes. So I hope you guys all look forward to that. I'd like to thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.